WCW Nitro on PlayStation 1. This is a game I looked at in the past, but like World Tour and Revenge, I look at those videos now and I'm not happy with how I covered them. Not only did I clump Nitro and Thunder together in one video, but I also used the PAL version without configuring the emulator correctly, and I played the game at breakneck speed. The PAL version of Nitro did play fast, but it definitely didn't play this fast. So I'm revisiting Nitro in today's video, and I'm going to show you guys why this is maybe the weirdest WCW game ever released, and possibly the weirdest wrestling video game of all time. Released after WCW vs. the World and WCW World Tour, but before WCW NWO Revenge, Nitro hit store shelves in the United States on January 1998, while European grapple fans had to wait until June 98. Nitro was the first WCW game released by an American studio. Chicago-based Inland Productions took care of development, while THQ published the game. And WCW Nitro was also the first game Inland Productions ever developed. From what I gathered online, Inland Productions was founded by two guys who worked for a previous company known as Studio E, and Studio E tried to sue Inland Productions and THQ for using their development equipment while also failing to deliver a game named VMX Racing, a game that had already started development. Needless to say, they were up against some stiff competition when it came to creating a WCW-based video game. Aki had done a wonderful job with WCW World Tour on N64, and WCW vs. the World was also a highly playable, if not a bit ugly, video game that kept wrestling fans entertained the previous year. Over on the WWF side, fans were still putting up with Warzone and the rather clunky gameplay that game provided, and with World Championship Wrestling being so hot at the beginning of 1998, there was a real opportunity to capitalize with a good WCW video game based on the record-breaking Monday Night Wrestling show known as Nitro. THQ gambled by using a completely unknown developer, though you gotta keep in mind too that the blueprint for a good wrestling game, that being World Tour, was still very much in its infancy, and it's not like Inland Productions could just rip Aki off and steal their gameplay ideas. No, instead this new developer tried something very new, and unfortunately it didn't work out too well. Okay, here's the title screen for WCW Nitro, and as I go through the menus and options, you'll notice how rudimentary the whole menu system really is. Highly compressed and low quality images are nothing new in PS1 games, but instead of having the same charm as other old PlayStation games, it instead looks like a student project running on Windows 95. We do have the Nitro theme music playing in the background along with the NWO theme song, but these are also highly compressed for some reason, even though we could obviously have CD quality music on PS1. Now, the character select. Most people would say this is the best thing about Nitro because we can hear short promos from the wrestlers by just pressing a button. I can't begin to explain how awesome this was at the time, and I'd be amiss if I didn't play a few of these right now.
If you want to wrestle an inch more Ric Flair, you gotta be able to walk that aisle and style and profile. Woo! You really think you're ready for the Stinger? You really think you're ready for the Scorpion Deathlock? You think you're ready for a fatal encounter?
Did you know that there's some hidden rants in this game? Yeah, both Alex Wright and Eddie Guerrero have hidden promos. Tap the circle button 2 or 3 times on either wrestler and you'll hear the guys cut promos in German and Spanish respectively.
You better be ready to wrestle, because you know, when you're getting in the ring with Eddie Guerrero, it's gonna be high-flying and exciting. Alístense, porque ustedes saben, cuando entran al ring con Eddie Guerrero, les voy a dar lo mejor de lo que yo tengo.
We start a match, and gotta say, I always thought this game captured the look and feel of a WCW arena quite well. The way the lighting set up, the entranceway and the ring all look pretty good, even if things aren't exactly right. I mean, compared to WCW vs. the World and WCW World Tour, it definitely has the atmosphere nailed down, so at least we have that positive. We then come to gameplay, and oh boy, this is where things take a nosedive. Press the X button to kick. Square will let you punch your opponent in the face. Press the triangle button to do a chop. In the circle button's your general action button for performing Irish whips, climbing the ropes, picking up your opponent, all that kind of stuff. You can pull off a little backstep by pressing R1, and you can block attacks with L1. The L2 button lets you taunt your opponent, brother. And if you want to run, you'll have to double tap a direction, but keep in mind there are no running moves in this game. You can't pull off a running clothesline, for example. This game does not have a grapple button. If you want to pull off wrestling moves, you'll need to enter button combinations, and this can be really hit or miss. All superstars share a basic set of moves, such as a pile driver, performed by tapping triangle then circle, a powerbomb, performed by tapping square then X, and other shared moves include a backbreaker that you can perform by tapping down, square, and triangle. You need to be really fast with your button taps, and you need to be right beside your opponent to pull these off. So if you fail to deliver your move, it's probably because you either weren't quick enough or you weren't right in your opponent's face beforehand. I've heard people compare the button inputs to Mortal Kombat, but no, Mortal Kombat actually registers your button presses, whereas pulling off moves in Nitro feels like playing the lottery. Each wrestler also has a few signature moves, so Sting can perform a Scorpion Death Drop by tapping triangle, triangle, circle. The Stinger splashes here, and you need to tap X, circle X when your opponent's in the corner. And your finishing move can only be performed when your opponent's health meter flashes red. Sting's got his Scorpion Deathlock, and you'll win the match as soon as it gets applied. Okay, have you got all that? Well, that's WCW Nitro in a nutshell. There's no running strikes, no running grapples, no rebound grapples, no submission moves except for the finishers, no countering, and no reversals. Basically, you're going to be trying your best to remember button combinations while also praying to God that entering that combination actually works, because sometimes it feels like a real game of chance. And as soon as you land that move, your opponent's right back on their feet, and you need to remember another move if you want your match to be at least a little varied. There's no stun at all when fighting on the outside. Both you and your opponent gets right back to their feet following a move, so brawling outside is even more frantic than inside. The AI is completely broken too, with your opponent frequently going to the top rope at the most ridiculous times. And yeah, this is WCW Nitro gameplay. It's not good, is it? There's a few other issues with this game that's worth mentioning though, a few game breaking issues that make Nitro even more atrocious than what it already is. We'll talk about this in a moment. By default, interference is turned on, and I'd say around 6 or 7 times out of 10, someone will interfere in your match. The problem here is that the game just can't handle more than 2 guys on the screen at the same time, and the slowdown is both very noticeable and very off-putting. On the subject of interference, the AI can be extremely dumb, and an interfering wrestler will just stand there while you pin your opponent, so it wasn't even implemented correctly, even if it was one of the earliest 3D games that allowed outsiders to get involved in your match. This slowdown also affects tag team matches, where the game runs even slower. WCW Nitro only features singles and tag team matches, so that leaves you with only one match type to play if you want a relatively smooth experience. Go into options, turn off interference, and never turn it on again. There's a single player tournament mode that lets you play through 10 matches to unlock new characters and new rings. However, interference remains on here even if you turn it off in the options menu, so playing tournament mode in this game quickly becomes incredibly tedious. Once you beat 10 guys, you'll be given a highlight video featuring your selected wrestler, which is pretty cool, not gonna lie. But the thought of doing this to unlock every character in the game was, and still is, really daunting. Go back out to the title screen, enter a cheat code, hear this weird confirmation noise that your cheat code worked. And say goodbye to tournament mode forever. This is the reason why cheat codes were invented, to stop you playing terrible games for hours like WCW Nitro. Also, just a quick side note, there's a cheat code for Big Head mode in this game. Yeah, Big Head mode was a staple in video games during this era, and I want to say it all started with NBA Jam, but I'm not too sure about that honestly. There's also a big head and big feet mode just to make things extra stupid, but one thing you do notice when using these cheat codes is how good the face textures actually were in this game. It's been upscaled here of course, but in comparison to other wrestling games back in this era, the wrestlers' faces do look pretty good in Nitro. It's just a shame it plays like absolute crap. One of the big game breaking issues I mentioned earlier on is this right here. You see, if you Irish whip your opponent, you can immediately cancel into a standard wrestling move. Irish whips take priority over other button commands. They're quick to pull off, seeing as all you need to do is press back and circle. So you can just spam this over and over again if you want to win matches easily, no matter what difficulty level you're playing on. When playing 2-player with a friend who also knows this little shortcut, then it really becomes a game of chance. Whoever Irish whips first is going to land a big move. There's another game breaking issue in one of the unlockable stages, but we'll get to that in a moment, because now we're going to talk about all the unlockable content this game has to offer, and this is when things get weird. Really, really weird. As mentioned earlier, if you beat tournament mode, you'll unlock a wrestler or a wrestling personality within the game. Some of these unlockables are pretty good, such as Rey Mysterio Jr., Conan, Ultimo Dragon, Steve Regal, Miss Elizabeth, Kimberly Page, and Eric Bischoff. Sadly, a lot of these guys share the exact same moves as wrestlers found on the default roster, so they're merely cosmetic changes and nothing more. Also, the unlockable guys don't have rants on the character select screen, which is definitely a shame. I really wanted to hear what Steve McMichael had to say.
And don't stand there drinking coffee when a man's talking to you, Davy boy! Whoa. Here we go again!
Now, for a PS1 game, you'd be happy enough with this bunch of unlockables for sure, but wait, there's more. If you have the time, patience, and insanity to complete the game again with each of these unlockables, or if you enter a cheat code like any sane human being, then you're going to unlock even more characters: red and yellow Hulk Hogan, Randy Anderson, Surfer Sting, Tony Schiavone, an alien, a snowman, a giant bee, a dinosaur. What's going on here? We have some of the craziest hidden characters that ever appear in a wrestling game, but wait, there's even more. When you unlock one of these original characters, you'll also get to wrestle in some new arenas. These range from pretty interesting, like this graveyard for example, all the way to this right here. This can only be described as a bad DMT trip, and I had to put Alex Wright in there just to give this nightmare a little light, a little hope that everything's gonna be okay. Play on this level for more than 2 minutes though, and you're gonna be far past fucked. There's a level where the ring floats around in outer space, creating just enough visual discomfort for players to throw up in their mouths a little. There's a level named Texas that's got nooses hanging above the ring just to give it that authentic Texas feel, you know. Buzz has his very own beehive level that grosses me out, but thankfully we've got Hulk Hogan trying his best to destroy it all with the power of Hulkamania. We've got a jungle level, and I like to think the animals of the jungle were responsible for building the ring. This one's called the turbo level, and it's actually pretty lazy. Just the ring canvas, the ring ropes, and nothing else. The Hall of Mirrors is just like that previous nightmare we bared witness to, only it's even more chaotic. Like the symmetry's all messed up, and really, who thought this was a good idea? Grayling the alien has his very own spaceship, plus he abducted Scott Hall and stole his ring gear. This right here is the rec room where everything looks way too big and our superstars look like little action figures. I'd like to think that's what they were going for, but I'll bet you anything you want they weren't. This, I don't even know what this is supposed to be, but it's not good. Here we've got a circus level, also known as WCW Nitro in the year 2000. We've got a weird mansion type level that proves the developers really loved using those mirrors. It's super distracting, and when you've seen one, you've seen them all. Here's a winter wonderland just in case you wanted to play as Whitey the Snowman or Santa Claus. And then we have a disco level that brings me to another game breaking issue. The developers thought it would be cute to include the YMCA dance on this stage as a taunt. When you do it, your opponent's going to join in. So choose the disco level, throw your opponent out of the ring, do the YMCA dance, and get a count out victory every time. These developers didn't care, man, and speaking of the developers, they too are selectable in the game. You tell me, who's ever going to want to play as these guys? Who would ignore Sting, Hogan, Randy Savage in favour of Dude Man, Uncle Monkey, Tony the Rod, and Eddie the Wire? You know who wants to play as Eddie the Wire? Yeah, Eddie the Wire himself. These jagoffs put themselves in the game so they could flex on their friends, but you know what? WCW Nitro is so bad that these clowns should have been embarrassed to put themselves in this game. Claiming responsibility for developing WCW Nitro's like admitting to shitting yourself in public. Also, there's these guys in suits, Brian and Steve. I assume these corporate schmucks were big wigs at THQ or something, but again, no one's ever going to pick these goons for a wrestling match. Imagine going to school and telling people your favourite wrestler in Nitro is Steve, the suit guy. You'd get sent home for being sick. If we set the character rants to one side, this right here, all these strange characters and all these strange arenas, are what most people remember from Nitro, and yeah, it is quite fun to look back on and it's pretty fun to laugh at nowadays, but this was Monday Nitro, the biggest wrestling show in the world when this game got released. We should have been talking about the excellent gameplay, the insane match types, the story mode where we went up against the NWO, and the great variety found in the base roster. Instead, we remember 10-second FMV sequences and Ivan the fucking bear. Just before I wrap this part up, you can find some weird things in the unlockable levels if you look closely. Like in the disco stage, Medusa's standing there refusing to look at the action in the ring because it's so dreadful, and Jacqueline's standing over at the other side of the ring also. In the graveyard level, there's this one little boy standing beside a gravestone just hanging out. It gives me the creeps. Back to reality, so to speak, and back to traditional wrestling arenas and traditional wrestlers. I mentioned earlier how they did a pretty good job capturing the feel and atmosphere of a WCW show, but I should also point out that they got pretty lazy when it comes to some pay-per-view arenas. Every arena is the exact same, bar the ring mat, ring apron, decorations around the barricade, and the graphics used at the entranceway. Slamboree, for example, reuses much of the Nitro arena, and they just slapped a few different JPEGs here and there, and the same's true for Fall Brawl, more or less. The NWO arena has the commentary booth moved to ringside, which WCW never did until 1999, and even then it was only the announce desk. So there are things you can nitpick when it comes to overall design. We can't be too harsh here either though, and you gotta remember this is a PS1 game. In terms of arenas and set designs, it still beats the crap out of WWF Warzone, and I'd say there's even more thought put in here when compared to WCW World Tour, so it does have a few things going for it if you put yourself back to that time period. Again, the character models don't look bad. By today's standards, they aren't good of course, but you do get to appreciate the effort a bit more when you play WCW Nitro with a little upscaling. At the end of the day, it all comes down to gameplay though, and the gameplay found in Nitro isn't good. It's annoying at times, and each match plays out the exact same way. You've no freedom to do your own thing, you feel locked down with your limited moveset, there's not enough game modes or match types to keep you busy, and the tournament mode isn't good thanks to slowdown and repetitive gameplay. It's shocking to think that this game got ported to the N64 1 year after it was released on PS1, but apparently THQ were contractually obligated to release another WCW game before their partnership ended, and that's why N64 fans were treated to another release of WCW Nitro. This one's kinda weird too because it's called Nitro, but it features the wrestlers found in Nitro's sequel, WCW Thunder. We're missing the promos and rants from this game because there's no way Inland could work out how to get FMVs working on the N64 even though it was possible, but the same crappy gameplay's here and it's still absolutely miserable. I like how they made Goldberg look more like Arn Anderson though, he's got that horseshoe hair going on and it looks so bad. Nitro also got a PC port, and this release was based on the N64 version. I got it running fine, but I struggled to capture gameplay footage using OBS. But here, have a look at what I did capture on my phone. The game totally glitched out and the textures got messed up big time. It's like the WWE's Thunderdome on crack. Not even joking, this was the most interesting thing about playing the N64 and PC ports of WCW Nitro. As mentioned, this game somehow got a sequel, and that sequel was named Thunder. I'm guessing the N64 and PC ports just retained the Nitro name because it was a more recognizable TV show or something, I don't know. Whatever the case, I will cover Thunder in another video, but it won't be for quite some time yet. Thunder and Nitro are so similar that I just end up going over the same talking points, so I think I'll give it a bit more time and come back to it sometime in the distant future. Should you go out of your way to play WCW Nitro? No, you shouldn't. While we were all easily enticed by that Nitro logo on the front cover, and while we were all so eager to play more WCW games after getting spoiled by World Tour, this just ain't it, chief. Nitro may have a good roster, the arenas may look pretty good, and it most definitely deserves to get highlighted in a YouTube video for how weird the Unlockables are. The gameplay itself is so monotonous, so disgustingly repetitive, that it really doesn't deserve any of your time. But I do appreciate you spending your sweet time to watch this video. Thank you everyone, and if you like this video, please subscribe. Take care.